The nation's first public monument to atheism is going up right here in North Florida. Just ahead, we'll take a closer look at what's happening in the small town of Stark and take your calls. Good morning. Live from Studio 5, this is First Coast Connect on 89.9. Thanks for tuning in on this very stormy morning. I'm Melissa Ross. Hope you're staying dry out there. We'll have weather updates throughout the day here at 89.9 WJCT. Well, a busy show coming up later in the hour. Congressman Andrew Crenshaw is chairing hearings in Washington regarding the IRS's alleged improper scrutiny of Tea Party-affiliated groups. We will speak with Congressman Crenshaw at about 9:30 this morning about the latest with the IRS. Also ahead, why animal shelters in town are taking part in one Celebrity Chef's Challenge. And later, a look at all this weekend's events, stormy weather or not, with Carrie Speckman. All of that ahead on the show. But first this hour, the first public atheist monument in the country is going up in our area. Stark, Florida has been chosen as the site of a 1,500-pound granite display in front of the Bradford County Courthouse. Florida members of American Atheists are putting up the monument next month opposite a controversial display of the Ten Commandments that's already outside the Bradford Courthouse. Now, the dueling monuments in Stark are indicative of the growing national conflict over public displays of religion. This morning, we're discussing this issue in detail. On the line with more, we welcome Dave Muscato. He is spokesman for American Atheists. Dave, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
And joining us here in Studio 5, Professor Greg Pingree, professor of law specializing in constitutional and religious law at Florida Coastal School of Law. Good morning.
Hi, Melissa.
And our question to callers, what's your reaction to the atheist monument that's going up next month in Stark, right in front of the Bradford County Courthouse? This is the first such monument in the country. Let us know your thoughts. We're already getting lots of feedback on social media. The number 549-2937. That's 549-2937. Send your emails to firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. Tweets to @MelissaNJackson. Dave Muscato, your organization, American Atheists, your Florida membership, made the decision to do this in response to a display of the Ten Commandments that went up last year outside the Bradford County Courthouse, correct?
That's right.
And why did you decide to put this monument in front of the courthouse? What is the reasoning behind it?
Well, our original intent was actually to have the Ten Commandments monument removed. The way that we see it, it's unconstitutional to have a religious endorsement on public property in that way. And we sued Bradford County saying that this is a violation of the First Amendment of the Establishment Clause, asking them to remove it. And what originally happened was the county manager, he didn't exactly side with us, but he saw, the problem here with this, and he asked the group that donated the monument to remove it. And they, quote unquote, prayerfully considered his request and decided to refuse. And so we were really left with no choice but to follow through with the lawsuit.
This is indicative of other disputes over religious displays in public spaces around the country. There was a dispute in Florida's Dixie County back in February. The ACLU sued over a Ten Commandments display in front of that courthouse. A judge ruled it could stay. There have been controversies this year over displays of the Ten Commandments in public schools in several different states. Can you explain why your organization, American Atheists, feels strongly that these displays are improper?
Well, the First Amendment makes it pretty clear that the government is not to endorse any particular religion or aid any particular religion. We have separation of religion and government in this country. It's a basic tenet of our governance. And when you look at something like the Ten Commandments, the very first commandment is, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me." And that's a pretty overt conflict with this freedom of religion that we value so highly. And it just doesn't belong on government property.
And we're discussing the first atheist monument in the country. It's going up next month in Stark, Florida, outside the Bradford County Courthouse. 549-2937 to join the show. Professor Greg Pingree, Florida Coastal School of Law. Constitutionally, this is a murky area, isn't it, when it comes to public displays of religion?
It's about as murky as it gets, Melissa. It's, in fact, there are, even as we speak, several tests that the Supreme Court could apply and has applied in the last 20 or 30 years. But it's interesting, Mike used the word endorse, And I think that's worth noting because that may be the predominant way of looking at it right now. Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, before she left the bench, had involvement in numerous cases involving this issue, and she essentially softened what was established prior to that as called the Lemon Test, which required three things to be true for a public monument to be able to stand in front of let's say a public building like a courthouse. First, that it have a secular legislative purpose. Second, that it not endorse that it not further or diminish religion. And finally, that it not get excessively entangled in government activity. And she talked about that test as essentially being one where the spirit of what we're trying to do constitutionally is to keep people from perceiving that the government is endorsing a religion. And that has essentially been the spirit of the holdings of the Supreme Court since then.
And the country's been conflicted about this for so long. This is simply the latest flashpoint, would you say?
Yes, it is. I expect this will go on and on and on.
And Dave, let me ask you about this. This display will include a quote from the Treaty of Tripoli, a 1796 agreement that is an article of faith for atheists and agnostics because of its declaration that the government of the United States is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion. That will be engraved on the monument, correct?
That's right, and President John Adams signed that proclamation, and that's why we think it has historic significance and are including it.
And what's been the reaction since you announced plans to erect this monument?
It's been mixed. We've had a lot of people contact us from Florida who are thrilled that we're representing our side of this here. We've also had a lot of hate mail that we've gotten. And just watching social media and things like that, we've seen some people say, well, we're not thrilled about it, but we understand that they have the right to do this. That's the agreement that they came to, so we're going to go along with it.
Let me ask you this. Critics of your decision might say, why go to all this trouble to put this monument up since you don't believe in God? Why have a monument to a non-belief?
Well, it's not really a monument to non-belief. It's a monument to separation of church and state, which is something that we care about very much. And it's a monument to secularism, which has a huge effect on the history of the United States, and it's important to the way that our government is run. And that's really what it's about.
Lots of calls on this issue. What's your reaction to the first public atheist monument in the country? It will be put up next month in Stark, Florida, small little Stark, outside the Bradford County Courthouse. An interesting place for this to happen. Lots of calls. Let's go to the phones at 549-2937. Gil on the south side. Good morning, Gil. You're on the air.
Well, good morning, Melissa. Yeah, I think this is not a monument that actually is proactive about atheism. It actually is a monument to take away some of the misdirection that religion provides in terms of politics and in terms of governing. So I think this is very much needed. If any of you remember Madeleine Murray and how she was pilloried because of her ideas about taking prayer out of the schools. This is not a Christian country necessarily. I mean, not everybody here is Christian. People have, they should have their own choice. They should make the decisions based on their own feelings. And, if we keep having the thing like we did last week with the mayor having a religious conference and only Christians were invited, all it does is it puts up barriers between people instead of crossing those barriers and moving forward.
All right, Gil, thanks for the call. Professor, what about his comments, in particular with regard to the flap over the interfaith breakfast in Jacksonville recently?
Well, I can't speak precisely to that because an interfaith breakfast may be something that is private and people can have who they want. But he's right that it sends a message if it's connected to government that there's both exclusion and inclusion of respectively those who are not welcome in terms of the religious mainstream and those who are welcome. I want to add one other thing to what both Dave and the caller have said. This is also a First Amendment free speech issue, and I think that's implicit in what Dave has said. This is not going up, as he said, to promote atheism per se. It's going up because this space was dedicated by Bradford County as being a place of public debate, of civil dialogue. That was the point of it. In fact, reading from their language, it said, we want people to put monuments there to commemorate, quote, people, events, and ideas which played a significant role in the development, origins, or foundations of the United States of America, Florida law, or Bradford County. And so when the Community Men's Fellowship got the permit and erected their 6.5-ton Ten Commandments monument, it was simply a matter of the atheists or anybody else saying, well, we want to have our point of view represented there too. And if the only point of view that is standing there in front of the courthouse to be perceived by all the public is a specifically religious one, then it does risk running afoul of the Establishment Clause.
Dave Muscato.
Yes. I mean, the way that I see it, he's right in that the Ten Commandments monument was supposed to be representative of the history of the United States or Bradford County specifically, or Florida law. But the way that I see it, the Ten Commandments are not part of the foundation of the law of this country. In fact, explicitly, when this country was founded, they wanted to make sure that religion was not overly, he used the word earlier, talking about the lemon test, entangled with governance. And as I said before, many of the commandments are specific to Judaism and the Judeo-Christian God, and we don't see that as an appropriate entanglement.
And as the professor mentioned, the Community Men's Fellowship, which is behind the Ten Commandments monument in front of the Bradford County Courthouse, hasn't responded to requests for comment. They did post a statement on their Facebook page saying that they believe God has worked this matter out. Lots of calls. Let's go back to the phones at 549-2937. Nader in Jacksonville. Nader, good morning.
Good morning, Melissa.
Go ahead.
Well, I wanted to say that it is kind of funny that when we are driving around, we can see churches saying that all are welcome, but at the courthouse, we see the Ten Commandments. And on the other hand, talking about the religion, well, we've been having problems here in North Florida in Jacksonville because the Baptist Church always has the influence on the officials, the businesses. They can close businesses if they want to. They can decide what shows to be on TV. They can decide where any clubs to be at or whatever, because they have the influence on the mayor, the councilman, and everybody. On the other hand, why they put something like that to begin with? It doesn't make sense because, well, the law says do not kill, so why do you have to go by the Ten Commandments? Because the law here is the law. It's not the Christian law.
All right. Thanks, Nader. Thanks for the call, Nader. Let's go to Ed. He's along the Buckman Bridge. Hi, Ed. Thanks for holding. Are you still with us?
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. I think that what happened here is that usually is that they hit a small towns which basically agree to their conditions, like putting a monument next to the Ten Commandments, simply out of the economic blackmail, because their lawyers say we can afford to fight this. There's a big difference between putting the Ten Commandments, which, by the way, is on the Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court, and all over buildings all over Washington, all over the United States historically. Ten Commandments, it was a lot different than saying having a monument that says Jesus is our Savior, or Buddha is the way to Nirvana, or Allah is great, which is very specific and very promoting of a particular faith. So the Ten Commandments by itself have been proven to be historically part of the tradition in the United States. Again, it's in the United States building. I see going to demand that they're going to put an atheist statue or something to that effect. It's silly for the Ten Commandments versus a more specific religious type of statement.
Thanks, Ed. Dave Muscato, what about that? This is all going down in a small little North Florida town with a heavy evangelical Christian presence. What about some of his comments?
Well, first of all, I do want to say that we would have, as far as I'm concerned, done this anywhere that this has come up, but this has just happened to be where we decided to put in the first one. And like I said, our original intent was not to put in our monument. It's just we didn't see this as an appropriate thing. And really, just because this type of thing is also in place in other buildings, other government buildings around the country, doesn't make it more appropriate here or in any of those places. And it does specifically endorse a specific God. He mentioned that if it said something about Buddha, if it said something about Allah, then that would be inappropriate. But this is okay because this is just general. But that's not true. Like I was saying before, I mean, it specifically says don't worship any other gods except Yahweh, the Judeo-Christian God, and that's not appropriate based on the first.
Yeah, Professor.
Yes, I would agree with Dave. I would say further that context is probably the most important factor to consider here. There are probably 50 places around the country where the Ten Commandments are represented in some way in government property, and the caller was right. The Supreme Court is one of those. But as recently as 2005, the Supreme Court decided two cases at the same time that went in different directions regarding this, and it gives sheds some light on this. A Texas case called Van Orden, where the Ten Commandments are on the state capitol grounds. And the court held that that was okay because there were plenty of other symbols, monuments, artifacts there that suggested that the Ten Commandments was not the message that was being sent. There were many things that sort of suggested the history of Texas and the United States. Whereas a case called McCreary in Kentucky, there was a Ten Commandments display in the courthouse. And that was so specific and so direct a message that this is our religion without anything contextually there to suggest anything else, that the Supreme Court found that that was unconstitutional. It went too far.
Lots of feedback as we discuss the first atheist monument in the country. It's planned to be set in front of the Bradford County Courthouse next month in Stark. Here's an email from Michael. I'm not a religious person. I don't feel like any religious monument, including one for an anti-religion, belongs on public government property. What would a monument to atheism even consist of? Lots of feedback on Twitter this morning from Gia. This is good. Remind everyone that church and state should be separate. From Shauna. As a neo-pagan, I appreciate this support of the separation of church and state. Lots of feedback. Let's go back to the phones at 549-2937. Brian down in Keystone Heights. Hi, Brian. Good morning. Thanks for calling.
Hey, I live in Bradford County. This is distressing to me that it's all political to me. These people want to get the church vote, so they put up this, and everybody says, oh, they supported that, so let's vote for them. I challenge the last caller to show me anywhere where the Ten Commandments is the founding document where our government is based upon. There is nothing in our Declaration of Independence or our Constitution that mentions Jesus or anything to do with the Bible. It says nothing about religion except for in the amendments where, you know, the government is not. That's what made us special in 1776 and 1789. That's what made us special is our country does not have these kings and religious and Roman Catholic churches. It just disgusts me that we're still debating this 200 years later. Thank you.
Brian, thanks. Dave Muscato, he's basically laying out the central premise behind your rationale, behind your reasoning for doing this.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I do want to stress, again, that it wasn't our original intent to put in our own monument. That was a settlement that we came to. But, yeah, he's right. Our government and the laws here are not based on biblical principles. They're not based on the Bible or on the Ten Commandments. In fact, that was a specific concern that our founding fathers had and that they did not want. And, yeah, he's completely right.
Let's go to Malton in downtown Jacksonville. Malton, good morning.
Yes, good morning, Melissa.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to mention that I have a dollar bill in my hand right now, and it says, "In God we trust." So, I mean, the religion is everywhere in America. So why are they not contesting? Why are they just contesting this small little town? But right here in the American government dollar, it says, "In God we trust." Do they have any issues with that?
Thanks for that, Malton. Let's get the professor and then Mr. Muscato. That, in a nutshell, sums up some of the complexities of these issues in American public life. Professor.
Well, it's very common for people to pull out their money at this point and to point into "In God We Trust." That may be problematic somewhere down the line, but it's important to remember the history of this. As both Dave and several callers have pointed out, at the founding of the country, it was very clear that the most important value was to make clear that there would not be a state religion. Even so, 8 of the first 13 colonies made state religions, and that is why Thomas Jefferson and others spoke out so strongly against it. But things like mottos about God on the money and the words in one nation under God in the Pledge of Allegiance actually have come since then. In fact, mostly they're a product of the Cold War, when it was important to the leaders in the country to make affirmations that we were not a godless Soviet kind of country. And so really those don't go back to the beginning, and it may be that somewhere down the line there will be some challenge to that.
Dave Muscato, that is all quite true. However, America is a religious country. It is, I'd say, between 70 and 80% of Americans are Christians. When you make these arguments, you often run into pretty strong pushback from those who believe that, and I'm quoting from just recent debates on these types of issues, that taking God out of the public square or taking God out of our schools is what is causing the problems, not the reverse. What would be your response to those who make those arguments?
Well, I would say America, it's not really correct to say that America is a religious country. We are specifically not a theocracy. Many Americans are religious, but I think there's an important difference to be noted there. As the caller was saying, and as the professor was saying, yes, during the Cold War in the 50s is when these things were added to our money, and I do think that those will be challenged soon. And they actually have been challenged recently, and that's still ongoing.
Let's go. We've got a pastor on the line. It's Pastor Troy on the east side. Pastor Troy, good morning. Go ahead.
Good morning. How are you?
Great. Go ahead.
Well, I think we need to face off that, first of all, that there's a lot of hypocrisy between...
Can you speak up a little, sir? We're having trouble hearing you.
There's a lot of hypocrisy when we talk about religion of America. Christianity is endemic in America. And what I mean by that, the Founding Fathers were perhaps wise enough not to put specific religious language in the Constitution. But our very first president, Washington, he was a Christian, and he used to pray in the Senate. He used to pray long prayers, but they were also Masons as well. So we have to understand that perhaps the Founding Fathers had a hidden agenda. And if you study history, you'll see that there's a hidden agenda. And, of course, Christianity is endemic in this nation. And it excludes all other religions as well. So there's a built-in institutional prejudice within the framework of this nation historically.
Thanks for the call, Pastor Troy. Professor Pingree, your thoughts?
Well, I'm not sure that I would agree with everything that the pastor said, but I think he has a point that, culturally speaking, Christianity is endemic. Obviously, the founders and pretty much everyone who had a hand in the establishment of the country, 2.5 centuries ago, was a Christian. There's no question about that. But the point that those who wrote the founding documents, and we call the Founding Fathers, were trying to make above all else, again, was we must not have a state religion. And so while, and as it's played out, it's become clear, while it is okay for us to acknowledge in general ways the importance of Christianity, of non-sectarian Christianity, as well as the Judeo-Christian tradition more recently as a part of our history, which undoubtedly it is as a fact of history, that's different than the government putting symbols up, and symbols are so important in religion, symbols up that suggest to the public generally that we are in favor of this religion. That's what is not allowed.
Let's go to Johnny in Yulee. He's been holding. Hi, Johnny. Good morning.
Yes, good morning. I just, excuse me, I've been a Christian in my life, and I wanted to say thank you to the atheists. They have, with this debate here in North Florida, they have brought me back to the Word of God. I kind of pulled away from it in my life and wasn't really reading the text the way I should have been. And with this debate, it's kind of sparked my interest, and it's brought me back to the Bible to read the Ten Commandments and to get an opposing point of view from a Christian's look. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you for bringing me back into the Scripture of the Holy Bible. Thank you.
That's Johnny and Yulee. Thanks for the call this morning, Johnny. And so many callers on the line. Sorry we can't get everybody on. However, let's give Dave Muscato, spokesman for the American Atheists, the last word. Mr. Muscato, where do things stand? This monument will go up next month in Stark. Is that correct?
It'll go up at the end of this month, and the unveiling is the 28th. I think that's the right day, at noon, that Saturday. It's open to the public. Everyone is invited. There's going to be a celebration afterward, after the press conference that everyone is invited to as well. Yeah, we think that this is a big step forward. It's a historic first in the history of the United States as far as separation of church and state. And we're really proud of this, and thanks for having me on.
Thanks for joining the program.
Thank you.
We were joined this morning by Dave Muscato, spokesman for American Atheists, and Professor Greg Pingree, professor of law with Jacksonville's own Florida Coastal School of Law.